My mother didn't even bother to call. The betrayal arrived in a single, sterile bubble of text that lit up my dark apartment like a flare. "Claire, please don't come. The family wants a drama-free wedding." A heartbeat later, the screen flickered again. My sister Lily had tapped a little heart on that message in the family thread, as if my absence were a gift. No hesitation, no question, just instant approval. I watched that tiny digital icon bloom under my mother's words and felt something inside me splinter, not with a loud crack, but with the almost soundless snap of a thin bone giving way. I stared at the phone long enough for my reflection to fade into the glass. Then I typed 2 words that tasted like ash and freedom at the same time. "Excellent call." My thumb hovered for a moment, then pressed send. And with that quiet, deliberate tap, I stopped being their solution, their wallet, their shield. They had no idea what I was about to take back from them. My name is Claire, and in my family, I was never the favorite. I was the function. Growing up, if Lily entered a room, people shifted to make space for her. She was light and lacquered perfection, with hair my mother Angela brushed like it was a religious ritual, telling anyone who would listen that Lily was born for big things. When I walked in, hands moved toward me too, but only to place things there. The dishes that needed washing, the forms that needed signing, the responsibilities no one else wanted. For years, I thought that made me important. I mistook usefulness for love. From the outside, we looked like a catalog family. Angela knew how to host a dinner that smelled like cinnamon and approval, her lipstick sharp, her smile sharper, every gathering curated to impress. My father, Robert, drifted at the edges of every scene, soft, apologetic eyes, a man who specialized in staying neutral until neutrality became its own kind of cruelty. And Lily glowed. She was the girl whose teachers called her a natural, whose mistakes were misunderstandings, whose late arrivals were worth the wait. I was the one who made sure the bills got paid on time and the plans didn't crumble. Even in childhood, my role was obvious. On Lily's 16th birthday, when she burst into tears because the cake design wasn't exactly like the photo, Angela turned to me, not her, and hissed, "Fix it, Claire!" as if the entire day would collapse if I didn't. I did, of course. I always did. I became a project manager as an adult because order calmed me. Color-coded spreadsheets made sense in ways people rarely did. So when Lily got engaged to Jason and Angela turned to me with that bright, expectant gleam in her eyes and said, "You'll help us pull this together, won't you?" It was less a question and more a command dressed up as inclusion. I said yes automatically, the way you swallow after you drink water. I handled everything: venue deposits, lighting designs, catering contracts, rental agreements. Every estimate landed in my inbox, every invoice connected to my personal account. I paid, not because Lily had earned it, but because Angela assumed I would. The only person who ever really saw what that did to me was my grandmother, Alina. In the small backyard garden behind her modest house, the world was quieter. The air smelled like damp soil and old roses, and the hum of traffic faded into a distant buzz. As a child, I'd sit on the stone step while she trimmed her rose bushes, watching the way her veined hands moved with patient precision. "Strength isn't just what you carry, sweetheart," she used to say, snipping away dead petals that looked perfectly fine from a distance. "It's also what you put down and walk away from." I didn't understand then. I thought strength meant saying yes until your back broke. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, that garden became my refuge. I'd stop by after work, timelines and budgets still spinning in my mind, and Alina would pour tea into chipped cups while I sat beside her among the roses, my shoulders sagging a little lower each time. She watched me in that quiet way she had, eyes soft but sharp, as if she could see the invisible threads tightening around my ribs. I remember one afternoon, the sky the pale gray of an old bruise when she touched the small silver pendant around my neck, the necklace she'd given me on my 21st birthday. "For clarity," she'd said as she fastened it years ago. That day the metal caught a weak beam of light and flashed. "You look tired, Claire," she murmured. "Not in your face, in your spirit." I laughed it off because what else was there to do? But the truth was already creeping in, grain by grain. At every planning meeting, Angela fawned over Lily's whims like they were commandments. If Lily wanted peonies out of season, Angela didn't ask how, she asked me how fast. If I suggested adjusting the guest list to keep the budget reasonable, Lily would barely lift her eyes from her phone, fingers scrolling lazily as she sighed. "Can't you just make it work? You always do." That phrase clung to me for days, like smoke embedded in my clothes. You always do. Not thank you, not I appreciate you. Just the expectation that I would bend, stretch, and break to keep their fantasy floating. The first real shift came in my mother's kitchen one evening, the smell of garlic and lemon thick in the air. On the counter, next to the fruit bowl, sat a worn envelope I recognized instantly. Alina's emergency savings. I'd watched her feed that envelope for years, small amounts of cash tucked away like little prayers against disaster. Angela's gaze flicked toward it while she talked, her tone light but her eyes calculating. I was thinking, she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel, we should turn this into a full wedding week. Welcome brunch, rehearsal cocktail night, luncheon with Jason's parents. We'll show them how we do things. Her manicured finger tapped the envelope once, almost idly. My stomach went cold. Mom, I said slowly, the word thick in my throat, that's Grandma's safety net. It's not party money. She gave me a look she reserved for what she called my dramatic spells, a tight little smile that never reached her eyes. Oh, Claire, don't be so intense. Your grandmother doesn't need all that, and Lily's only getting married once. I turned to Lily, hopping for some flicker of conscience. She stood by the fridge, sliding the sleeve of her new dress up her arm, the dress I had paid for without a word, and shrugged. It's not like Grandma uses it, she said, casually cruel. We'll put it back later. The way they said we meant you. The realization hit like a slow, spreading poison. They had talked about this without me. I was not a part of the conversation. I was the resource being allocated. A few days later, I took Alina to her dress fitting for the ceremony. The boutique smelled like fabric and perfume, the mirrors unforgiving. She stepped carefully into a pale blue dress, smoothing the material over her hips with a trembling hand. In the reflection, our eyes met. I heard your mother, she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustle of fabric. They're arranging things as if you're not there at all. She didn't say they were preparing to erase me, but I heard it anyway. The fitting assistant called us over before I could answer, and the moment slipped away like a thread cut clean. I think a part of me still hoped it was all a misunderstanding, that some last-minute conversation would fix everything. That hope died in my mother's living room, under soft lamplight that made everything look warmer than it felt. I'd stopped by to drop off the final rehearsal timeline, color-coded, carefully planned, exactly the way they trusted me to be. Lily lounged on the couch, legs tucked under her, phone held up close to her face, screen light bleaching her features. Angela sat beside her with a stack of glossy place cards, rearranging them with the intensity of a general mapping out a battle. Didn't know you were coming, Lily said when she finally noticed me, her tone not hostile, just indifferent, which somehow stung worse. We're confirming the seating chart, Angela added briskly. Lily found a better layout than the one you did. Better. The word lodged in my chest like a splinter. I set the folder down on the coffee table, next to Lily's bare foot. That's when her phone lit up again, the now familiar family group chat opening at the top. I saw my own name in the bubble of text from earlier that day, the message uninviting me that I still hadn't read out loud to myself. In front of me, with the same casual ease she used to like a funny meme, Lily's thumb tapped the heart icon beneath Angela's text. No hesitation, no flinch, just approval. I didn't hear a sound, but inside, that silent fracture I'd felt earlier deepened into something final. Lily locked her phone and looked at me with the bored patience of someone finishing a chore. It's honestly for the best, Claire. You stir things up. Everyone agrees. Everyone. I remember staring at Angela's rigid posture, at Lily's glossed lips pressed into a line, and realizing there was no miscommunication here. This was sleek, practiced exclusion. This was a plan. That night, back in my apartment, the city hummed beyond the window, a low mechanical lullaby. I sat at my table, laptop open, the glow of the screen washing my hands in a cold blue light. The spreadsheet I'd built for the wedding filled the monitor, rows and rows of numbers, due dates, confirmation codes. Venue, deposit paid in full. Catering, installments cleared. Lighting, rentals, daycare, photographer. Every item bore my name, my card, my liability. It didn't look like a celebration anymore. It looked like a ledger of all the pieces of myself I'd quietly handed over in the name of helping. For years, I'd told myself they didn't mean to use me, that I was just better at handling things, that love and sacrifice were the same. But in that stillness, with their rejection echoing in my chest, the truth settled like a stone. They weren't depending on me, they were devouring me. My phone buzzed once. Another message from the family thread slid into view, Lily uploading her improved seating chart, informing everyone that Angela preferred her version. No thank you for the hours I'd spent balancing the numbers, no acknowledgement of the work undone. Just the assumption that my efforts were disposable, the way my presence apparently was. I closed the group chat and opened a private message to Angela instead. The words came easily this time. You made your choice, I wrote. So did I from now on. You won't have my money to depend on either. I read it once, feeling for the old guilt that usually curled up in the pit of my stomach whenever I even thought about setting a boundary. Nothing, just a cool, steady calm. I hit send and listened to the faint whoosh of the message leaving, like an exhale I'd been holding for years. Then I turned back to my laptop with a different kind of focus. One by one, I opened every contract, every confirmation. The thing about being the organized one is that the power you hand over is usually yours to reclaim if you're willing to endure the fallout. I emailed the venue, referencing specific clauses about cancellation timelines. I wrote to the caterer, the Dacre Company, the lighting team, the rental service. We will not be proceeding with the event as planned. Please cancel pending charges. Do not run my card for any additional amounts. I gave no explanations. This wasn't gossip. It was a surgical extraction. As I hit send on each message, I didn't feel vindictive. I felt aligned, like I was finally acting in a way that matched the reality I could no longer pretend not to see. Around midnight, a soft knock sounded at my door. I opened it to find Alina standing there in her neatly pressed cardigan, a small purse clutched in both hands. She seemed even tinier framed by the hallway light, but her eyes were bright. I couldn't sleep, she said, voice a little shaky. I kept thinking about you sitting here alone. I stepped aside, and she moved in with slow, careful steps, lowering herself onto my couch and smoothing her skirt, a nervous habit I'd watched since childhood. For a moment, we just sat there, the hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet. Then she reached for my hand. I know what they did, she whispered. I know how they've always leaned on you until you bend. You don't have to carry them anymore, Claire. Hearing it from her, the woman they were now trying to use as one more resource, cracked something open in me. All the justifications I'd piled up over the years crumbled. I'm done, I said, the words surprising me with how solid they felt. I'm not going to let them treat you like a wallet, and I'm done letting them treat me like a tool. Alina's eyes glistened, but her smile was fierce in a way I'd rarely seen. Good, she murmured. When they come home, we'll be ready. A small shiver went through me at that, foreshadowing wrapped in a grandmother's voice. For the first time, I believed her. The day they were due to fly back from what was left of their ruined wedding week arrived with a strange, muffled quiet. Outside my window, the sky hung low and colorless, the city moving under it in sluggish currents. I brewed tea just to give my hands something to do, watching the steam twist and vanish. Beside me at the table, Alina folded and unfolded the same napkin, her eyes flickering toward the clock every few minutes. On my phone, there were no updates from Angela, no travel details, no see you soon. Their silence felt less like absence and more like erasure. But this time it didn't hollow me out. It cleared space. In the sliding glass reflection, I saw myself, hair pulled back, shoulders squared, the pendant at my throat catching the pale light. Not the background daughter, not the family assistant. Someone else. Someone new. Down at the airport, the air was cool and dry, smelling faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Announcements echoed from tinny speakers, and people moved around us in purposeful streams. Reunions, goodbyes, the quiet logistics of other lives unfolding. Alina held my arm, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. We met Daniel near the arrivals hall, a tall man in an understated suit, his expression composed. He shook my hand, then Alina, and opened the folder he carried, the crisp edges of the documents sharp in the artificial light. Everything prepared, he said calmly. Remember, you don't need to argue. The facts are enough. A strange steadiness spread through me at his words. People who feed off your guilt rarely expect you to bring reinforcements. The sliding doors to baggage claim hissed open and closed, releasing waves of travelers into the terminal. I saw them before they saw me. Angela emerged first, spine straight, lips pressed into what was almost a smile, the kind she reserved for strangers she needed to impress. Lily trailed just behind, dragging an overstuffed suitcase, her hair slightly frizzy from travel, but her outfit perfect for photographs she'd probably been taking nonstop. Jason walked a few steps behind, his attention buried in his phone, thumb flicking across the screen with practiced disinterest. Robert came last, shoulders hunched, expression tired. For a fraction of a second, old instincts tugged at me, the impulse to wave, to relieve, to step in and soften whatever was about to land on them. Then Angela's gaze caught mine. Confusion flared first, then slid quickly into annoyance. Her eyes flicked from me to Alina, then to Daniel, who stood just off my shoulder, folder in hand. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice pitched too high for someone supposedly uninterested in drama. "We already arranged a car." I met her stare evenly. "We're not here to drive you home." Lily rolled her eyes, the motion exaggerated. "So what?" she sneered. "You came to apologize for completely messing everything up." That old burn crawled up my throat, but before I could answer, Daniel stepped forward with measured ease. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Daniel Hayes, legal counsel for Claire and Alina." The words landed like a dropped plate. Angela's face drained of color, then flushed a mottled red. Lily blinked, her jaw tensing. Jason finally looked up from his phone. "A lawyer." Angela forced out a brittle laugh. "Is this some kind of joke?" Daniel didn't flinch. "This relates to the financial exploitation of Claire in connection with the wedding expenses," he said evenly, handing Angela a sealed envelope, "and the attempted misuse of Alina's emergency funds without her consent." People around us began to slow, their rolling suitcases wobbling as they sensed tension. Angela snatched the envelope but didn't open it, her fingers white at the knuckles. "We didn't exploit anyone," she snapped. "Claire offered to help, she always has, that's what family does." "No," I replied quietly, each word deliberate. "That's what I did, you never even thought to ask what it cost me." Lily stepped closer, eyes bright with anger. "You walked away from everything," she hissed. "You bylaid, you ruined months of planning, all you had to do was stay in your lane." Behind me, Alina's voice cut through the air, thin but sharp. "She didn't walk away," she said. "You pushed her, you told her she wasn't welcome at a wedding she paid for." A ripple of whispers moved through the nearby crowd. Angela turned on Alina, masking panic with contempt. "Mother, stop, you're blowing this out of proportion. This is a private matter." Alina lifted her chin, the fluorescent lights highlighting the fine lines around her eyes. "Private," she repeated. "You tried to empty my savings behind my back. You tried to take from the only person in this family who never asked me for a cent. That's not private. That's predatory." Daniel opened the folder again, sliding out a stack of printed screenshots and clipped statements. "These," he said, offering them to Angela, "are copies of the messages excluding Claire from the wedding." "These," he turned to Lily, handing her another envelope, "document your discussions about using Alina's funds for non-emergency expenses." Lily stared at the envelope like it might burst into flames in her hands. Jason shifted awkwardly beside her. Angela's shoulders began to sag as her eyes skimmed the first few lines of the documents. Robert peered over her shoulder, his face going slack. "This is ridiculous," Angela muttered. "You're twisting everything. We didn't mean any harm." "Intent doesn't erase impact," Daniel replied coolly. "And consent is not implied because someone has always said yes." Jason stepped forward then, running a hand through his hair, the golden wedding band he'd slipped onto Lily's finger somewhere far from us catching the light. "Can we all just calm down?" he said, trying for reasonable and landing on dismissive. "You're making a scene over money. We can work this out. It's not that serious." "Not that serious," Lena repeated, her voice cracking but fierce. "You encouraged my granddaughter to squeeze Claire for more events, more upgrades, more everything. You watched them drain her and said nothing." Jason opened his mouth, but Lily shot him a sharp look, a tiny flinch at the corner of her mouth betraying the first hint of fear. Angela finally tore her gaze from the paperwork and looked at me, something like desperation flickering behind her eyes. "What do you want from us, Claire?" she asked, her voice thin. "You got what you wanted, didn't you? You ruined the wedding. Is that enough?" The accusation should have hit me like a slap. It didn't. Maybe because I'd finally learned that refusing to be abused isn't ruining anything. I took a breath, feeling Alina steady beside me. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "That's what you never understood. I wanted respect. I wanted to be treated like a daughter, not a sponsorship. I'm done being your safety net. From now on, you live with the consequences of your own choices." A heavy silence settled between us. The announcements overhead droned on in the background, dissonant and distant. Lily's eyes shone, more with fury than tears. "So this is punishment," she said hoarsely. "You're doing this to get back at us." I shook my head slowly. "No, this is protection for me, for Grandma, for the parts of us you never bothered to see until you needed something." Daniel cleared his throat gently. There are formal steps outlined in the documents, he told them. You'll need to respond within the specified time frames. In the meantime, you're legally barred from accessing a leaner's accounts. Any attempt to do so will be recorded as fraud. Angela finally opened the envelope in full, eyes darting across the legal language. I watched her face crumble in stages, first indignation, then confusion, then unmistakable fear. This could actually cause trouble, she whispered, more to herself than to me. It already has, a leaner said quietly. Robert stepped forward then, hands half raised like he wanted to touch my shoulder and thought better of it. Claire, he said, his voice rough, we should have. I should have stopped this a long time ago, I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, but it was more than I'd ever heard from him. I nodded once, accepting without forgiving. Jason stared at the floor. Lily wiped at her cheek, smudging mascara beneath her eye, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, stripped of the entitlement that had always buoyed her. Angela's composure finally shattered. Please, she said, the word unfamiliar in her mouth. We're family. You don't do this to family. I held her gaze, feeling no need to look away. Family doesn't cast someone out after using them, I replied. Family doesn't try to raid an old woman's savings for a week of photos. You taught me exactly what this family is, Mom. I'm just choosing not to be part of it anymore. Daniel closed his folder with a soft click. We're finished here, he said. As a leaner and I turned away, the wheels of luggage rolling around us and swallowing their stunned forms back into the crowd, Angela's voice chased me one last time. Claire, what are we supposed to do now? I paused, heartbeat steady, the silver pendant cool against my skin. I didn't turn fully, just enough to meet her eyes over my shoulder. You figure it out, I said, the same way you always expected me to. And then I walked away, not powered by anger anymore, but by a strange, exhilarating lightness. The first taste of real freedom is quiet. It's not fireworks. It's the absence of a weight you didn't realize you were carrying until it's gone. In the weeks that followed, life didn't become miraculous or cinematic in the way movies promise. It just became honest. Daniel moved ahead with the protective measures for a leaner's savings. Signatures were filed, accounts were locked, and for the first time, the little envelope that had sat so vulnerably on Angela's countertop existed behind legal walls they couldn't scale. Vendors sent courteous confirmations of canceled services for the dismantled wedding, some with a hint of confusion, some with a dusting of sympathy. A few relatives texted me fragments of gossip, how Angela had spun the story, how Lily cried over unfairness, how Jason grew quieter as the reality of their new financial situation set in. I read none of it twice. Messages from Angela and Lily slipped into my phone like ghosts, angry at first, then defensive, then oddly polite. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I finally understood there was nothing I could say that would teach them what life would do on its own. Instead, I spent my afternoons in Alina's garden, the air scented with roses and damp earth. She seemed lighter, her shoulders less hunched, as if the decades of being treated as a backup account had finally started to melt off her bones. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the leaves like fragments of gold, she rested her weathered hand over mine. You saved both of us, she said softly. I shook my head, watching a petal loosen and fall. I just stopped pretending I couldn't see what was happening. But she smiled that old, knowing smile that made me feel like a child again and a grown woman all at once. That's what saving yourself usually looks like, she murmured. Inspired by what we'd survived, I reached out to a local advocacy center that supported older adults, people like Alina who'd spent lifetimes giving and rarely being protected. They welcomed my organizational skills like they were a rare resource. For once, I wasn't cleaning up after people who took me for granted. I was building something that aligned with the quiet fire that had always lived in me, buried under obligation. Looking back now, I used to believe love meant carrying everything for the people who claimed they needed me, even when my knees buckled. I thought sacrifice was a requirement, that if I just gave enough, they would finally see me. But real love, the kind that isn't coded in manipulation and expectation, never asks you to erase yourself so someone else can sparkle. My family's choices don't define me anymore. My boundaries do. Walking away from them at that airport wasn't the crack of a door slamming shut. It was the slow, steady opening of a life where I finally stand in the center of my own story. If any part of this felt like looking into your own reflection, If you've ever been the reliable one, the invisible one, the one they only notice when they need something, I want you to tell me. Share your story in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from, so neither of us has to pretend we went through it alone. And if you want more stories of women who stopped carrying what was never theirs to hold, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and stay with me. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying them, it's reclaiming yourself.